tuning in to Planetterrian Daily, episode 135 for July 29th, 2026. Here's what's new in science, health, and longevity research. A mathematical shape known for tiling puzzles now shows unexpected properties that could twist light into chiral patterns. Organisms weigh energy cost before retaining environmental memory according to a new analysis of cellular and animal behavior. Storing information about past conditions requires resources that could otherwise support growth or movement. Single cells in animals therefore activate memory mechanisms only when the benefit in decision accuracy exceeds the metabolic expense. In stable settings, the cost-benefit balance often favors forgetting and resensing. The analysis compares foraging models with cellular signaling data to identify thresholds. Future experiments will measure actual ATP expenditure during memory formation across species. The framework shows that memory duration is tuned to environmental variability rather than maximized for every possible cue. Right now, as you listen, cells throughout your body are deciding whether prior conditions are stable enough to justify keeping a record or whether fresh sensing is cheaper. In some bacteria, maintaining an epigenetic memory state can require up to 1/5 of the cell's total ATP turnover during active growth. When environments fluctuate quickly, the cost-benefit calculation often favors forgetting and retesting the surroundings instead. The same logic applies to larger animals that must decide whether to retain spatial maps of food sources or simply search again. Interventions aimed at boosting cellular memory, such as certain longevity compounds, must also consider whether the added information load improves or harms overall function under real-world variability. Now shifting to a very different area of research. A single mutation produces severe heart disease phenotype according to recent genetic findings. The mutation alters a key protein interaction that normally maintains muscle cell stability. Affected individuals show accelerated tissue remodeling despite otherwise typical genetic backgrounds. The finding highlights how one nucleotide substitution can shift entire downstream pathways. Follow-up work will track mutation carriers to map progression timelines. The study emphasizes that the mutation acts through a narrow set of molecular contacts rather than broad disruption of cardiac development. From precise genetic effects on heart tissue, the focus turns to broader evolutionary mechanisms that allow rapid trait shifts beyond standard mutation selection models. Biologists revisit older evolutionary ideas to explain anomalies in trait patterns. Standard gradual selection models leave certain rapid trait shifts and inheritance patterns unexplained. Researchers are re-examining mechanisms once dismissed, including forms of acquired character transmission. New genomic and epigenetic data show pathways that allow environmental experience to influence offspring traits within a single generation. The updated framework integrates these observations without discarding mutation and selection. Comparative studies across taxa will test the relative contribution of each process. The approach treats inheritance as a spectrum that includes both sequence changes and regulatory state transmission. From inheritance mechanisms, attention moves to physical shapes whose geometry produces unexpected optical behaviors at small scales. The Einstein tile shows unexpected light manipulation properties in new examinations of its geometry. A shape that solved a decades-old mathematical puzzle has drawn new attention for properties beyond tiling. Researchers note that while the tile's geometry enabled aperiodic coverage, its other mechanical and optical behaviors remain largely unexamined. These behaviors may allow controlled twisting of light into chiral patterns. The work opens routes to test how such shapes interact with electromagnetic fields at small scales. Next measurements will focus on fabricating physical versions to quantify rotation and polarization effects. The original mathematical solution already demonstrated that a single shape could cover a plane without repeating patterns, yet the new analysis highlights additional mechanical responses that were not part of the initial puzzle-solving work. From geometry-driven optical effects, the discussion shifts to rapid biochemical adaptation in insect populations under insecticide pressure. Mosquito populations rapidly boost detox enzymes against insecticides, according to field and lab observations. Exposure to common insecticides triggers quick biochemical and genetic shifts in mosquitoes. These changes increase production of enzymes that break down the chemicals before they reach lethal targets. Public health programs have relied on the same compound classes for years, accelerating selection for resistant variants. The study documents survival advantages appearing within few generations under field conditions. Monitoring programs will now test whether rotation strategies slow the observed adaptation rate. The documented enzyme upregulation occurs alongside specific genetic variants that confirm measurable survival differences in controlled exposure assays. From field adaptation in mosquitoes, the next topic involves large-scale ocean sampling that establishes baselines for future change. An Arctic Ocean expedition begins a 50-day North Pole transect aboard the research vessel Kronprinz Haakon. The vessel left Longyearbyen on July 23rd, carrying 30 scientists and 20 crew. The Polhavit 2050 program will collect physical, chemical, and biological measurements along a route to the pole. Data will establish baseline conditions for models projecting ocean changes through mid-century. Continuous sampling will include temperature, salinity, and plankton profiles. Results are expected to refine predictions of sea ice loss and nutrient cycling. International partners have aligned sensor calibration standards so that vertical profiles remain comparable across future cruises. On a different note, an AI system now images fruit hidden by dense foliage. University of Canterbury researchers developed computer vision models that detect and measure fruit behind leaves. The approach combines multiple camera angles with depth estimation to reconstruct occluded objects. Early tests show reliable counts and size estimates without physical disturbance of the canopy. The technology targets horticultural tasks such as yield forecasting and selective harvesting. Further training will incorporate additional crop varieties and lighting conditions. The same pipeline is being adapted for real-time disease and nutrient status mapping in row crops. Older adults adopt shared housing to remain at home amid rising support costs. The model mirrors the shared house setup popularized by a long-running television series. Participants report lower individual expenses while retaining private space and daily interaction. Local agencies are now examining zoning rules that currently limit such arrangements. Pilot programs will track health outcomes and service utilization over 2 years. The arrangements allow residents to maintain independence while sharing costs that would otherwise force moves into institutional care. Open peer review is linked to fewer retractions in journal data. Journals that publish reviewer reports alongside papers record lower retraction rates than those using closed review. The association holds after controlling for journal impact and field. Transparent processes may surface errors earlier or deter submission of weaker work. The study examined retraction databases across thousands of articles. Additional analyses will determine whether the pattern reflects review quality or author self-selection. Journals adopting open reports also show measurable differences in post-publication corrections. Hibernating snails are studied for potential medical applications at the University of Alberta. Researchers are examining metabolic suppression during snail dormancy. The animals survive months with minimal oxygen and no food intake while protecting tissues from damage. Early assays focus on proteins that stabilize cells under stress. The team aims to identify molecules that could translate to organ preservation techniques. Animal model tests are planned once candidate compounds are isolated. The work centers on how the snails maintain membrane integrity and prevent protein aggregation during prolonged low metabolic states. Extended pediatric hospital stays increase isolation effects, according to a recent analysis. Children kept in isolation rooms for infection control experience reduced social contact that persists after discharge. A medical student's analysis documents impacts on emotional development and school reintegration. Families report difficulty restoring normal routines once the medical crisis ends. Hospitals are testing structured visitation and virtual connection protocols. Outcome data from these interventions will guide revised isolation guidelines. The effects extend beyond the hospital stay itself and influence peer relationships and academic performance for months afterward. Organic egg production shows climate and biodiversity trade-offs in a UK modeling study. Shifting entirely to organic free-range increased land use and greenhouse gas emissions per egg relative to conventional barns. The analysis also recorded higher nitrogen runoff and lower on-farm biodiversity in some organic scenarios. Maintaining current mixed systems minimized overall environmental pressure. Policy assessments will incorporate these full life cycle metrics when setting future standards. The study held total egg production fixed so that differences reflect housing system choices rather than output volume. Keep an eye on next measurements that will quantify rotation and polarization effects from fabricated Einstein tile versions. That covers today's science and health news. Share this with someone who's curious about the latest research. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NERA Network. Links in the show notes. One more thing, if you liked today's episode, our sister show Fascinating Frontiers is worth a spot in your feed. The most fascinating news from space and science. It's one of the NERA Network's daily briefings, all free at neranetwork.com. Live dashboards, TSLA, SpaceX launches, the investing scoreboard are all at neranetwork.com/data. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.